we've now got Moderna spying on its critics with the help of ex-FBI officials. So the pharmaceutical company Moderna is reportedly employing a team of former law enforcement officials to track anti-vaccine sentiment. The team, which is part of Moderna's disinformation department, Ministry of Truth, some might call it, has compiled reports on high-profile individuals who have been critical of vaccine mandates, including tennis star Novak Djokovic.
But you don't know the Joker, bro?
I've read his name a million times, just realized never once said it out loud. As well with the tech mogul Elon Musk and actor Russell Brand. The team's reports have flagged the U.S. Open victory as a high-risk event because it could bolster anti-vaccine claims. They have also expressed concern about Musk's questioning of the COVID vaccine's effectiveness and Brand's criticism of pharmaceutical companies. Moderna's disinformation department is headed by Nikki Ruttman, a former FBI analyst. Ruttman is reportedly in charge of monitoring mainstream news and internal outlets for vaccine skeptic information. The department also uses artificial intelligence software to track vaccine-related content across a large number of websites. So what's your thoughts on all that? That's pretty crazy.
I think one thing is like this disinformation department thing. I mean, this has just become a weaponized cult against logic. That's what this is, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got their own little Ministry of Truth. Like, we get to make up what the truth is because that doesn't exist anymore. And everything we say is just, this is how it is. I wonder who even came up with that term. Do you know when that started? This whole disinformation thing? It started through COVID. I'm just wondering who. Yeah. Because someone who was thinking, like, this is a really good move. It was like really strong propaganda. This disinformation stuff, it's pretty dangerous. And all it is like I said, it's just this weaponized cult against logic. I mean, it's pretty wild. So that I mean, is something I think people should pay attention to when you've got pharmaceutical companies that have disinformation boards. Like, who's next? Who's next that's just going to be, hey, we want to just set the record straight here by telling you a bunch of lies because everyone's kind of figured out our game. Fuck you. The next thing is, I think one thing that I'd like to point out for a lot of people is guys like Djokovic, Musk, Russell Brand, it's about freedom of choice. It's not about being anti-vax, right? Anti-vax is another one of those disinfo terms that people use. It's just a derogatory term basically meant to pigeonhole dissent. And I think it's important to identify that because, like, there were a lot of problems with how they rolled this out. And the only thing that's worse is what has happened since, right? So for me, it's pretty wild that they get away with saying things like that. But my bigger concern here is, what are they doing with all this data? Why do you need it, right? Because you're not going to pay that much money for something unless you're going to utilize it. You're not going to have a disinformation board unless you plan on doing something, right? So I kind of see it as these three things. Like, first of all, they're going to sort of adjust their advertising strategy, maybe how they're going to market, where they're going to market. You saw that the shot of the day was Novak Djokovic during the U.S. Open. Like, it's crazy that they did that overlap on purpose. They were one of the primary sponsors. And I wonder if they get in the way of that to sort of be at the table. And that I think is I think that honestly is more of a minor example because it's in front of our face. But I think a lot of times they take this information and they go, how do we need to market? Because if people are following this guy, we need to make sure we break down this guy as disinformation and what we're saying as the truth. So I think that's one of them. That's the least nefarious. I think the other ones are actually worse. The next one is how they're going to use these things to shape policy. When they understand what the most influential people are saying about their products, which is accurate, to be honest with you, what they call disinformation, they can then go to these governing bodies, whether it's in Canada or whether it's global, UN, EU, whatever it is. And I think that they can help shape policy in their favor based on what they would call rhetoric, based on what the people are saying, because we all know how powerful they are. We all know how powerful Big Pharma is in and around the world. We're seeing this now with them suing Poland for billions of dollars because they don't want these vaccines. And that's very dangerous because if that goes through, it sets a precedent around the world. And again, it just shows you how powerful these companies have become. And it's pretty obvious. When countries are signing agreements that don't guarantee safety, which we know they don't have to, but also don't guarantee efficacy, and then we sign for hundreds of billions of doses. I kind of find it funny that they're like, one and done. Well, then how come we bought like 6 for everyone, you idiot? So anyway, it just kind of goes to show their influence. The reason I'm sort of bringing that up is because I believe they're using these things to shape policy. And I think we're looking at them highlighting some high-profile people, but I believe that they're doing more research, especially with this AI stuff, to understand bigger macro trends in the market, what's trending, what people are saying, what's going on. And then I think they try to shape policy around suppressing this. I think the primary benefactor behind a lot of these, infringement on free speech things are coming from pharma companies because it suits their needs. It's like they're another version of social media where they don't really care what happens to people. They just want to make their money. They don't care about your cause, so they implement policy to improve their bottom line. That's sort of the dark nature of corporate culture. It's kind of what it is. The last thing, which is people might think it's a bit of a stretch. I don't really think it is. I think it's pretty obvious. I think they're gathering this data to smear or discredit these people. And the reason I think this is because if they're out there saying something you don't like, there's probably a term for it, and I bet you know what it is. When you try to say one thing and then tie that string to another idea to discredit someone completely, even though they're completely disconnected. You look at Russell Brand now. I don't know whether he's innocent or not. It's not really, I don't want to weigh in on that right now. But it's funny that no one ever said anything. Then he goes against all these big pharma companies, and now all these cases come up. And these cases came up because these companies in the UK, these media companies, went and did all this research on him and dug into his past and tried to pull up whatever they could or find whoever, whether he did it or not, relevant in a sense. But who paid for that? Who's the benefactor? Well, one of their primary sponsors are Moderna and Pfizer. I'm not saying it's directly related, but it kind of stands to reason. You know what I mean? So they use this data to sort of smear these people. And look at Elon Musk. That guy takes on more fire from the media than anyone I've ever seen. And honestly, I don't care. The guy's changing the world for the better. I know sometimes people don't agree with his political views or the things he says or his fucking dad jokes or shitty humor sometimes. But I mean, the guy's on the spectrum. Give him credit. He's the most social guy in the world, and he's definitely there. So for me, I think, people could give him a little more flexibility in his quirkiness, because I think he's making a big difference in the world in a very positive way. But you're seeing these companies doing whatever they can to sort of smear him. Now, there's a lot of people that I think benefit from smearing Elon Musk. So I don't think it's just big pharma in this case. But again, it kind of goes to show what's happening here. And then we'll go with Djokovic. He wasn't allowed to compete at the Australian Open because he wasn't vaccinated. So he was finally allowed to go at the US Open, and then he was finally able to go back and he won it. But who influenced that? Because it was not logic. There was no logic used in that decision making, right? None at all. It was, you're on our side of the fence or you're not allowed in, even though we've got no facts to back us up. So who's supporting this? Who's funding these things? Well, we know how much money these companies are putting into these countries and these governments, and we know how much influence they have over media. So I think this is pretty dangerous. It's a pretty dangerous space that these guys can sort of weaponize ex-FBI agents to track down, disinformation against their brand. And I really hope that it's not a trend of things to come. But when there's this much money involved and what we saw through the pandemic and how much cash these guys made hand over fist, it might just be the way of the world now.
I don't know if it's the technical term for it or anything, but it is just weaponized character destruction. It's the idea of if we tear down this one person, then everything that person stands for gets torn down along with it.
Yes.
So a good example, I think probably the best example of it is Alex Jones, who undoubtedly has said some wild and unhinged shit.
Wild shit.
But
and he is so animated. Yeah, sorry.
But I think he also probably has a better track record of being on big topics than most mainstream media outlets.
I think he bats 8 for 10, roughly. If you go by Joe Rogan's numbers, he bats 8 for 10. The guy's record is phenomenal.
It's crazy. Even a week before 9/11, he was on the streets warning about a 9/11 sized
attack.
You look back for 20, 30 years, he's been calling things as they happen. And you're like, yeah, okay, so he gets, say, Sandy Hook extremely wrong, and he's definitely wrong on that one thing. And then they use that to just lampoon him and then say, okay, well, this is so obviously crazy what he's saying, and it makes everyone else in public perception now go, okay, well, everything that guy's saying must be crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's even, I think, a common tactic as well with intelligence agencies, with this spread of conspiracy theories, where you'll see genuinely wild conspiracy theories, say like flat Earth and all this kind of stuff, and then they'll lump it together with a lot more plausible conspiracy theories. So there'll be like people that believe that the CIA assassinated JFK are also most likely to believe that the Earth is flat.
Yep.
And then by tying these two things together, one that is actually just incomprehensible off the hop, and then by tying it to something that could be very well plausible, if not undeniable at this point, then now you start throwing essentially seeding doubt into that
Yeah,
topic.
you dilute the idea. Yeah.
And what you were talking about there too with whoever coined the term disinformation, I think that's just a marketing trick off of something that was coined and was very effective multiple years beforehand, which was fake news.
Yeah.
Disinformation is literally just the liberal version of fake news.
Yeah, it's just a better way of saying it. Yeah. It's just more kids. Yeah.
What's ironic about both of them is it's like whether it's right-leaning media outlets or left-leaning media outlets, majority of them that are on a corporate international scale are lying through their teeth. They are pretty much disinformation outlets or fake news outlets, whatever you want to call them. But both sides just look at it and go, well, it's them spreading the lies. Come trust our lies. Like, yeah, you don't want any of those second-rate lies. We got the good stuff over here. It's trash.
When I see these kinds of things, it just makes me sort of boil down to the idea that humans have kind of lost their way. You know what I mean? I know this is like a little macro for the idea, but I get a little caught up sometimes in this stuff where people just continually put power and profit over progress in the people. And, you get these companies doing these things that are sort of falling very much in line with that idea. And it's sad because it happened so slowly over time. They just kept moving 1 inch at a time, and now we're so far away from what is decent for humans. We live in such a backwards way to how most humans would like to live and to how we can live to actually evolve as a species. And I don't necessarily mean evolution like grow a fucking tail. I mean have more peace, have more love, have more unity, have more for everybody. We've just gotten so far into this fold of power and profit. I genuinely wonder if we can ever get out of it.
No, to stay on the meta level of it, though, I do think that history is just a constant cycle between whether you want to call it decentralization versus centralization, whether you want to call it collectivism versus liberty, any of these things. It seems like a revolution starts getting enough steam that at a certain point, like you're talking about, it seems like there's no going back. The only thing that feels like it can stop at that point is it collapsing in on itself, is something from essentially becoming unstable from its own size. And I think that's what happens. I mean, that's what happened with the Soviet Union even, which is probably the most egregious example of an authoritarian state in history. It's one of those things where I think a lot of people are naive in believing that there can just be some policies taken out, some legislation taken out, and all of a sudden the ship will start righting its way again. But I think it's much more of a collapse thing. And then you got to look at it more so as, do you want this bubble to continue growing? And then when it bursts, it's much, much larger of a bang.
Yeah.
Or do you want to burst the bubble now before it encapsulates a lot more? And the Sam Harris types of the world would go tooth and nail and say, well, we must have trust in our institutions, and we can't undermine them. A society without, so whether it be education, pharmaceutical companies, governments, all of this kind of stuff can't survive, and they're right. But it's like you almost need to rip them down now because they're completely tyrannical.
Yeah, so I think there's two ways to look at this. One is, if you want your institutions to work, you have to work for your institutions. So people have to get involved, right? That's one way of looking at it. The other way that I sort of see it is, it's actually so big and so interconnected globally that I don't know how you have a fall of the Soviet Union anymore, because you've got NATO, you've basically got two factions, right? So it's gotten to the point that I don't know how the bubble bursts. I don't know how it falls apart, and then we have some sort of like, I'm going to call it level playing field for lack of a better term. So we have some sort of level playing field where we can sort of rebuild and try to reestablish, how humans should survive and live and thrive, and what should, how to bring peace and how to, evolve properly. Do you think that there's ever a future on this planet as humans that happens?
No, I don't. And two, I think at the end of the day, it's just human nature. It's unavoidable. If you look at so many instances throughout history, so many of the issues that we face today have been faced by all great civilizations before us. So I think it's a matter of human nature and real evolution, like you're talking about, whether it be growing a tail or even psychological evolution. Man, we're talking about things that take place over tens of thousands of years. So it's like that's getting over human nature. I don't think is something that we can really do. So at this point, it seems like these issues are inevitable to some degree. I mean, I hate to say it because I'm not for these things at all, but the only way that I could see you overriding some of these mechanisms that are just in our DNA to avoid them happening on societal wide levels is like merging with tech, some sort of thing with Neuralink or AI, all of this kind of stuff. And you're like, that's the only way you're ever going to override human nature.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's not a solution that I want to put in place, but I do wonder if there is some people large scale that go, all right, for this, one world under one banner type of idea.
Yeah.
This is the route to go there.
I think it's inevitable that we merge with machines. I think that's going to happen no matter what. I think if not, you're going to be left behind. And I think as generations move forward, it's just going to be kind of the way of the world for sure. Where we go from there, I don't really know. But at the end of the day, no, I mean, to kind of circle back, I guess I find it a little frustrating that these big companies just keep doing nefarious things that are not really good for humanity. And we're sort of forced to go down this line of doing these things that are more radical to try to right the ship, correct our course. I don't think you and I are going to see it in our lifetime. I think we're going to end up seeing a lot more violence than anything, to be honest with you, because I think this is becoming an untenable situation for a lot of people. But again, the rebuild for me takes decades.